Hello and welcome to another episode of GM Talks. Today we'll go into instructor mode. I'm going to show you a little Grandmaster secret that netted me a lot of wins over the years. It's from the Carlsbad structure, which you see here on the board. Um, and the Carlsbad structure usually arises from something like the Queen's Gambit declined, or the Exchange Caro-Can, or maybe even the Grenfell defense or the London. And as you see, white has one more pawn on e3 and black has one on c6. That also determines the plan for each side. And it doesn't matter what pieces are on yet, but this is something we'll get into, which is very important. Anyway, White's plan is either the minority attack, that is, he will go forward here, like here, here, and here, and then he will attack this guy. And trying to settle black with a weakness on c6. This is in general the idea. If black goes past with the pawn, then the d pawn will become isolated. There are various ways for black to defend against the minority attack. This is something I'll get into in a later video because the Carlsbad structure is super important. It's one of the things you simply have to master if you want to become a grandmaster. But you cannot learn everything all at once. So today we'll just learn one simple concept. It's about which pieces are good in these squares. Okay, this was one plan for white. Another plan for white is to go with the pawns here and create a strong center, because the white actually has a majority in the center. And if he does this in the middle game, he might be able to get a space advantage on the king side and in the center and transform it into a king side attack. This was a favorite plan of Garry Kasparov and also the great patriarch Botvinnik from Soviet Union. So this is the White's two plans. He also, in the early days, White also did some knight e5 and f4, and which is known as the Pillsbury attack. But it's not so effective anymore. Sometimes it can be very strong, but in general, it's just settled white with the weak pawn on e3 when the knight is kicked back with f6 at some point, unless the knight can sacrifice itself. Okay, black also has plans. One of the things that characterize this position is, of course, that white has the C file to attack, and black also have something. He has the E file, and that's the only open file close to the king side, and usually sometimes white will castle queen side, but in general both sides will castle king side, and black might have a chance for a king side attack because he, due to the open file, he has some more space there and more maneuvering space. And even with for instance, with the bishop on d6, he's already maybe threatening on ace2 and stuff like that. He might also use his majority on the king side. Some plan that might work, especially in the endings, is to do something like this, an attack on e3. Because e3 is sort of the base chain of white's pawns structure. It's a little bit like what white is trying to do on the queen side. Okay, this was about the pawn structure. The next thing we're going to look at is what happens with pieces on the board. Just one thing to notice is, in general, the pawn structure is regarded as slightly better for white. And here we have another situation here with knights on the board, and that actually changes everything. And most people don't know that. They still think that white is slightly better. But with just one knight on the board, black is almost always okay if the knight is on d6, because from this is a super square for the knight. It covers this guy, it covers this square, covers this square, and covers this square. Especially the c4 square and the b5 square are important, because after an a6 by black, he already have three guys defending b5, which makes the important minority attack very difficult. Also, if white goes something like b4, then this square becomes super juicy. And the knight will jump here, and where it will attack e3, that we already know might be an attacking point, but also discourage any kind of attack along the c file. So a knight on d6 versus a white knight is almost always better for black. And most people don't know this, so let's see that in it as an example. I've used this many times. And here we are with Bobotsov versus Petrosyan. We are in Lugano, 1968, before most of us was born. And this is a classic game and something everybody should know. Petrosyan shows this very important strategic concept that you can use in your game. Okay. And we have a Queen's Gambit on the board. And here white takes on d5, the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. It's a harmless version with an early knight f3, which allows black to get his white squared bishop outside. Usually the white squared bishop is a problem for black to develop that guy. But here it's possible, which makes this not a very good chance for an advantage for white. Okay, but we are more interested in the middle game strategic, so let's fast forward, not the openings. All very normal. And g6. And now black is ready for bishop f5, and I think in theory he has already equalized here. And as we noticed, it is very nice for black to exchange this square bishop, and here it happened very fast in an easy way. And we now see that black has a very good bishop because it's on the opposite colors from all his central pawns. White's bishop is also good because it's outside the pawn chain, so it will probably have something to do. It's not possible to play around it, so it will probably be exchanged against a knight or a bishop. And this is doesn't help anything, and all very normal moves. And this was an interesting concept at the time. Black does not exchange the knight. In general, with black, you want to exchange pieces and simplify and make it sort of easy to hold a draw. But black is maybe getting a little ambitious. Also, the thing is that since the white squared bishop has gone, the square c4, this square, will be a problem for white. It will not be easy to achieve b4, b5, which is sort of white's best plan. You also have a plan of f3, e4, but black is active and well developed, and it's not likely to succeed without the d4 pawn becoming a target for black. Okay, bishop d5, knight e4, little trick. And he can take on e4, and maybe he should, and just move the queen back. Black will play knight d5, and he will try to attack on the king side with the f pawn. But white might be able to keep his knight close to e5, so whenever black plays f5, it will jump back and sort of stop the attack in the e file. This is a standard way for white to stop black from doing too much, is to cement this knight, make it into a statue on e5. And here the knight is of course very, very strong. And he should probably just take it. It doesn't matter really. He takes here. And here we have the situation. And this position is already slightly better for black. We see that the minority attack is not going anywhere. And due to the open file, black has so much activity that f3, e4 is not going to happen. You will always have something like knight f5 or double the rook on the e file. So black is already clearly but slightly better. And white has no active plan. That's the problem, because the only really good plan here would be the minority attack. But due to this guy here, the knight, well, it's not going to happen. You could just play a6 and b4 and a4 and b5. You just take, and we'll take with the knight. And as it is right now, the knight is multifunctional, while white's knight is not doing anything. The only thing he can do is sort of keep an eye on e5, and if black ever goes f5, you will just push your knight on e5 and say, okay, the worst is over. It's gonna be a disaster. Anyway, so even though the position looks fine for white, good structure, nice pieces, he's already in trouble and has very big trouble finding a plan. And Bobosov never finds anything that resembles a plan. Of course, he's a different weight class than Petrosyan, but still, it's kind of surprising how easy it is. Oops. And h5, preventing queen g4, and in general, you say, okay, this weakens the king side, but here black has such a big space advantage on the king side that white can never sort of counterattack there. And basically, white has no plans. So, and of course, this is something Petrosyan usually did. When he could repeat moves once, he would do that just to prove to the opponent that he has no active plan. And of course, he doesn't do it again. Queen f5, and black's plan is to slowly expand on the king side, starting a king side attack, and white, well, he has no plan. f6, kicking the knight again, and rook d7. Other rook comes. Oops, I keep doing that. King d1, knight e4. All the pieces are coming. And of course, we want to keep the queens on, threatening knight d2, preventing that. And here comes Petrosyan. And when Petrosyan sacrifices a pawn, you should be very nervous, because then something bad is coming. And this is also what happens. d5, threatening d4 and d3. And we see that this is basically the way black would like to make the minority attack, is to weaken this guy on e3 by pushing the pawn to d3. At the same time, keeping the pawn on f6 and keeping that knight out of e5, where it would sort of try to stop the attack. And he took the pawn. And now we're ready for the fun. The H file is open. Rook e1, g4, take, and of course black is almost winning here. White should be very careful he doesn't just lose instantly. He's trying to get his pieces out, but this is not good because of this. And here Bobosov resigned. And that looked very easy, and it looked like white didn't put up much of a fight. But in all truth, his position was strategically very difficult when he ended up in this knight versus knight scenario. And this is the little secret of today's video. This structure with the knights are clearly, but only a little bit better for black. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Bye bye. Carlsbad structure. It is probably the most important structure to master at the moment, because it is featured in a lot of topical openings. The Queen's Gambit, the Semislav, the Caro-Kann, the Grünfeld, and you name it. So this is something you would probably need to know, even with black or with white, and understanding the plans for white and black will help you a lot. Today at GM Talks, we're going to look at one of white's strongest plan. This is probably the strongest plan he has, and it's called the minority attack. And it doesn't mean that that you attack minorities. It means that the minority attack the majority, which we will see in just a minute. The game we'll see today is between Van Wely and Nigel Short, Loek Van Wely and Nigel Short, and it's from 2010. There are a lot of games we could have chosen. I think this game is pretty good because it somehow shows the approach white should use when conducting a minority attack. Okay, let's get on with it. And this will be the Queen's Gambit. And of course, as I said, it can occur in many opening lines, and therefore it is nice to know. Here, black sort of plays with maybe playing the Cambridge Springs variation after bishop d5, c6, e3, queen a5, but allows white to go into the straight normal exchange variation without any fuss with the bishop coming out here, as we have actually discussed a little bit in earlier video. Okay, we'll go fast forward. This is the main line of the Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, and it is very topical because it's featured in a lot of monograph and opening books, because it's easy to learn for white, and it saves the author a lot of time because there's not that many lines compared to maybe the bishop f4 Queen's Gambit or all the main lines. But it is also considered one of the best options for white. One of the best options for white. And a lot of black players has actually avoided this line for a long time. But recently it seems that black is starting to say, okay, we also have our ideas, especially since the Caro-Can exchange variation has become all the rage at the moment, and white is searching for ideas and suddenly realize, maybe I can use some of these ideas with black. Okay, this is the standard, one of the standards. Here he plays knight f8. Knight e4 might be interesting. And here Nigel or Van Wely plays bishop f4. And this is another line. If he castle, we will be into the old main line. Here, white makes the possibility also to castle queenside. White has 5 plans, and today we look at the minority attack. We will get the other 4 plans in later videos. So don't worry, we will get the other plans in later videos. So don't forget to look in if you want to know what to do with white with the other plans. And after that, we will look in how to play with black, especially that he has actually 8 different possibilities against the minority attack. So there's a lot to choose for, a lot to think about, a lot to know. Here, black chooses to go a5. This is aimed at white's idea to castle queenside. Black simply, if white was to castle queenside, black will probably sacrifice the pawn with a4 and try to open lines on the queen side. And I think that's pretty good. The problem with this move is that it makes this move less appealing due to the hole it will create on b5. That's the kind of grandmaster subtleties that can be hard to get, but that's why I don't really like the move a5 in a lot of positions, because it makes your position less flexible and makes c5 much worse than it was. After a5, Van Wely has decided that the queenside was not a safe place, so he castled kingside. And this is one line, and this is very typical. Take, and we have a sort of a normal position here. White's idea is basically to go a3, b4, and b5, and attack here and make this into a weakness. This is the minority attack. As you can see, white has only 2 pawns on the queen side, and black has 3. So the minority is attacking, trying to create a weakness. And the reason why normally you cannot attack where you are the weaker part, but here you are helped by the open files. The C file helps white, and also that white has a sort of a strong center makes it easier to carry this out. Black's Meanwhile, is of course trying to think about what to do against the minority attack, but also he wants to get something going on the king side. Rook f e1. That's an interesting move, and that's actually plan number 4 for white. That involves e4. He will switch plans in just a minute, but it makes sense as what black is slightly uncoordinated here to toy with the idea of e4. In general, the minority attack doesn't need to happen so fast. It's much more important to control the position. And here Black makes a slight mistake. He plays bishop e6. He needed to have more control with this square. Not because of e4, but because he wanted to play knight here, which is a big part of the counterplay. The thing is, if you go back, queen e7, e4 is very annoying because Black is not ready for this kind of but instead of bishop e6, he should have played bishop d7 with the idea of queen e7, knight e4. So this is Black's plan. Oops, damn it. Just a second. Go back there. That was a new move. Bishop d7 with the idea of going queen e7, knight e4, and knight h4, and attacking on the king side. This would have been a normal way, and I think Black should be fine after bishop d7. Bishop e6 is slightly wrong. a3. White is ready to start the minority attack. Rook e7. What Black has another way he wants to control the e file. This is where Black's main ideas comes from, is the e file, but it's kind of slow. Take. And we see that that already White is probably slightly better here. And here in the notes, Van Wiele doesn't mention the move b5 or c5, which is a very common move in similar situations, because the isolated pawn on d5 is not nearly as weak when White's c file is weakened. We'll get back to this in the video on how to play with Black against the minority attack. Here he carries out the plan with knight e4. Unfortunately, it's a bit slow because he doesn't have to take, and the queen is sort of wrong here. It should have been on e7 because he doesn't have control over this square at the moment. So this knight is nicely holding everything together. Take, and rook up here, getting ready to give the pawn a little massage. And Black takes here, and I'm not sure I like that either. But he's already, the problem is he can't go queen f6 because knight takes d5 and so on. So the pin was a bit awkward, but the problem is here, White is already getting close to attacking that pawn pretty much, and the Black counterplay is not coming, and especially when all the pieces are disappearing, there will be no kingside attack. No kingside attack when there's no pieces, which makes sense. Queen f6, and here White plays a very strong move. Just notice that Black just maybe set up some tricks here. This is very common trick with the queen on f6. Should always look out for it with White. In this position, what is the most important thing is White plays, well, it's the kind of move that's very hard to find unless you have seen it before. So now after this game, you've seen it before. Take here. Whoa, that nice bishop against that ridiculous knight, but the knight was coming to h4, and also with only one weakness, it was not likely that White will be able to win. As we know from Aljechin's, there is a principle of two weaknesses, And this is kind of important in a lot of positions, especially in these kind of positions that you need two weaknesses to win. Usually what white does is he gets one weakness on the queen side, and then he starts to search for another weakness, making the black position passive and eventually finding another weakness and winning the game. And this is more or less what happens in this game as well. Okay, so getting rid of the knight, taking back with queen. Now this is a serious threat. So king f1, f6, and white is the black's problem, of course, here. But with f6, he did kick the knight out of the game, and black is defending this pawn. So, but it will be over in just 20 moves. Queen rook a1, taking the open files. Queen h5 again. This is the threat, searching for counterplay, and sometimes this counterplay can be pretty strong. This queen and bishop is not so easy to get rid of. But here comes another strong move, knight e1. This is the square that could be attacked. This one is covering it, and here we have the knight just getting back. Queen f5, king g1, queen d5, and now the king is totally safe. There's no attack anywhere, and getting the rook around doesn't make sense. And white is basically ready to do something like this, because this big pawn down here is in trouble. Queen f5, attacking the pawn, knight d3, and notice that it's 20 moves since white managed to give black a weakness, and since that he's just been parrying threats, and this is very normal. You have to be patient with white, because you're waiting for black's activity to die, and when it dies, you win. Simple as that. And this is also what's going on. And back with the king. Nasty, nasty, nasty. Rook c8, and here comes the other rooks. And now he's ready to invade. Bishop e8, queen comes in, and suddenly black has all passive pieces. The knight has, look at this nice square where it can jump here and here. g8, and black is busted. And to put this into perspective, Nigel Short has been playing the Queen's Gambit his whole life, and he was a world championship contender. So you should not underestimate the minority attack. If you make one little mistake, like he did with bishop e6, then you play against a strong player like Van Wely, that is especially strong with these kind of positions, then it's definitely not easy. And here, well, it's tough. Yeah. You see, check, and this battery down here is, of course, a big problem for black. And here. And the threat is this, and there never came any counterplay, and well, a great game by Van Wely, maybe not so great by Nigel Short, but it just proves how strong the minority attack really can be. Thank you for watching GM Talks. This was your host, Sune Berg Hansen. There will be more videos on the Carlsbad structure to arrive soon here on YouTube for you. Thank you for watching. Carlsbad Structure plans for white part 3. Today you're gonna look at the Pillsbury attack. It was something they played around 1900, and sometimes it still works today. It is Harry Pillsbury, American well, he was probably not a grandmaster because I don't think they had that title back then, but a very strong player. He was creating fear among black players with putting his knight on e5 and putting the pawn on f4 and just attacking the king. And it's sometimes a very strong plan. And even though when we look at black's options in the Carlsbad structure, we will see how to what to do, how to deal with the Pillsbury approach. But it's something you should always be careful of, because when it's good, it's very good, and you just get. Okay, let's start with the game. This will be a short video. We are in the year in 1900 in Paris, and it's Harry Nelson Pillsbury against George Marco, who was not a bad player. And it's the Queen's Gambit, and they start off with a normal Queen's Gambit, you can say. And here he plays the, well, you could call it the accelerated Tartakower racing, but no one had heard about Tartakower in 1900, so we probably should call it the Fianchetto variation, or even the Marco variation. This is usually black plays h6 and bishop h4 and then b6, which is known as the Tartakower variation. Another option is knight e4. Bishop d3, and here he takes, and here black should probably take with the knight. Would probably have been the best option, and just take back with the bishop and play something with c5. And here white went knight e5. By the way, this is the Carlsbad structure. Usually we look at it with the pawn on c6, but it is the Carlsbad structure, and it also arises in the Tartakower racing. And one of black's plan against the Tartakower racing is actually to go b6, and in against the minority attack is to go b6 and c6 and answer b5 with c5. We will get back to that later in a later video. Knight e5. Knight bd7, maybe not the best move. Black should start to be attacking this square. This is the weak square in the Pillsbury attack, and you want to attack it. And we should notice that when white is doing this, because here it is, this is the Pillsbury attack. And we have actually probably seen it a lot with white recently in some semi-Slav, where it also makes sense to play this way. And it is very dangerous. White has easy, he has an easy attack on the king side, and already this knight is very strong. And if you take it, you will open the f file here. So this is something you should be careful of. Usually black should be able to defect this knight or play around it, and we'll get back to that. c5 cannot be bad, castle, but the next move, c4, I don't like. This is very typical of ancient chess, where you just play, I play my plan, you play your plan, and let's see which plan is the strongest. The problem is that white's plan is the strongest, so he definitely should not have played this move. He creates a majority on the queen side, and in an ending it could be quite nice. The plan is very simple: get the pawns rolling, and maybe someday capture this square when you get rid of this knight on c3. I'll just make it red like this. But before the ending, a guard put in the middle game, and this will be dangerous for white, for black. Already here we are seeing some things that black has to be careful. He has to cover there, that's fine. Okay, queen a3. There's already a serious threat in the position. White is threatening to take here. Oops, and I didn't do that right. I'll just show you. No, don't do that. And if black takes back with the queen, comes because this knight is suddenly overextended and must cover everything, and the king will have to go back, and bishop f5 and winning the queen. So there is a serious threat in the position already. d6, covering the threat, but of course f5. White is having all the fun, all the pieces are joining the attack, and this is the part of the Pillsbury attack that is just, and this, well, courageous, but of course, maybe not at the moment. The big threat is probably g6 and g7 and take on f6 and mate on h7. So you have to take back. Queen h4, just putting more pieces into the attack. Take here, here, queen takes, and rook takes. And we know that if he takes back here, he didn't do that, then this mate is very, very impossible to defend against, even if this queen was a rook. Instead, he played a5, hoping for something with maybe rook a6. The other rook comes in, rook a6, and here comes the check. Boom, threatening mate here on h7. Has to take, and this shows that even in 1900 they could really play chess. Actually, they were good, because he takes here, and it's actually made in 5 moves. We should see it. You have to take back, otherwise it's queen h6. Check, check, right? So check, and what now? Here, and you have to go king f8 and lose the queen. Here, this is mate, and here, this is mate. And of course, this is not mate, but it's hopeless, and actually it will be made very soon with these moves. So this was Harry Nelson Pillsbury with a great advertising for the Pillsbury attack. He won a lot of games with this, and you can look it up in ChessBase. It is great. Look out for the next episode about the Carlsbad structure, which will feature White's central attack with e4 without the preparatory f3, e4. Thank you for watching. Carlsbad structure, plans for White, part 2, central build-up with f3, and e4. A very strong plan. This is GM Talks with another episode on the Carlsbad structure, which we know from the Queen's Gambit, the Semislav, the Grünfeld, the Caro-Kann exchange. So it is an important structure, and it will make you a much stronger player if you know the plans and know what to do. And this is what we're all here to learn. Anyway, this is part 2. This is another plan. In part 1, we looked at the minority attack, the most well-known plan for White, and maybe the strongest. But this plan today is also very strong. So please take a seat and strap your seatbelts, because it's gonna be a nice game with Garry Kasparov, who played this line for White and who was a connoisseur of this line, against Ulf Andersson, who's known as a great defender and who really hates to lose. And sometimes you just can't help it, right? Let's see the game. Kasparov starts with d4. And we go here, and Ulf Andersson is not afraid to go into the main line. Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, which is sort of the pure Carlsbad structure. I think it was from this line the structure was named, but I think it is a very, very interesting structure that you must know. And Queen C2, another option is E3, and all this is well known. And in the other game we saw that white played with knight on F3. And the knight on F3 stands very well. It covers E5, covers G5, and has a great influence in the center and looks sort of harmonious. But there is another square for the knight, and the idea here is fundamentally different. Rook E8. Actually, white can even castle queenside. This is plan number 5 in white's arsenal, and we will look at that in the 5th video on the Carlsbad structure white plans. But in this video, we will look at castle kingside. And this is sort of the main one. The idea is basically to go E4, maybe E5, maybe F4, and blast black away. Sometimes, or quite often, the F file will be open, and this will give white good chances to attack black king. And even though at the moment, after bishop e6, black's knights here, they are all covering h7, leaving this battery sort of not so impressive. It doesn't take many moves for this coverage of the pawn to be gone. So black has to be careful, and white is putting a lot of pressure. He will put his rooks, and there's a big debate among the white players here. This rook here, does it belong on d1 or here or here? That's the big question. I don't know. I tend to prefer the d1 square when I'm playing blitz. But in this game, Kasparov put the rook here, and when Kasparov does something, everybody should usually listen. This, by the way, was played in Belfort in 1988, was part of the World Cup, which has nothing to do with the current World Cup, which is a totally different format. Black is getting ready for a plan with maybe c5, and anyway it makes sense to have this X-ray effect on the queen. Another plan which we will look at is not to play with bishop e6, but to play with g6 and knight e6 and get the knight out and making this sort of battery bad. When we look at plans for black, we will look at that, because I think that's a better plan than the plan chosen here, and I think that white is already better because black is a bit clumsy. Also, this can be annoying and hitting this bishop, and do you really want to give away this white squared bishop? This looks dangerous, right? Okay, king h1, normal, and I think white is more or less ready to play e4, and black sort of said, okay, I'll do something first. And when to play e4 is always the big question. I think white could play e4 here. You always have to be careful that's not something c5 comes or some other annoying counterplay. You have to be able to mostly follow up with e5 or take on d5 and f4, f5 or something. Kasparov decided to play it a bit slower, knight f4, just getting the knight out. We know this will come, but we don't know when it will come. So he's saying, okay, I have better preparing moves than you have. Rook c7, and when black's best move, then I'm sure white is right, because he has definitely more space. Queen f2, king to the king side. I think the queen will look rather good here. Another plan actually for white is sometimes to go with this pawn. We see this in the Nimzo Indian, which can also have the Carlsbad structure. I forgot to mention that opening. Knight f6, and now comes e4. And this was, I think, Ulf had reckoned that that it could not come here, because otherwise he would not have played knight f6, because he doesn't want to get kicked back. He took, and attacking the pawn. And if you take, then he takes with a knight, and all looks good. And we see that Ulf is very good with covering things. So even though it seems that there are some holes, at the moment they're all covered. But there is a problem, and that's the problem. d5, attacking the bishop, just going forward. And this is where it becomes a little bit difficult to play. You have to be able to find things like that. And after this is the intermediate move that's really the problem for black. The rook is attacked, and in such an open position, some sort of sacrifice of the exchange simply doesn't work. So he has to move, and he can take back. And here you of course love to take on d5, but it runs into a pin, and because of this square, you cannot enforce or make d5 stronger in any way. So he has to go, and this was definitely not the idea. And white just goes back. Very simple. And has a strong pawn and a great initiative. At the moment, the threat is d6. And after this, he just took a pawn. And even though Kasparov is a great attacker, if he can just take a free pawn, he will take it. This is for sure. And here black has absolutely no compensation. Actually, white is better. It's transformation of advantages, just using the space. And Kasparov did have great technique in things like this. He was very good at just finding the way to just kill all counterplay and win without problems. It was very seldom that he had a winning position like this and messed it up, which is of course normal for strong players. Take and white is a clear pawn up, and the two pawns here are passed. So if he just avoids any kind of counterplay, he will win rather easily. And the best way to play this technically is of course to exchange pieces, not pawns, pieces. You want to exchange all the pieces, because the pawn ending is easily winning. But of course, a minor piece ending is probably even easier. And so while black is struggling to coordinate, and here comes the pawn, and well, it's not really, and we find this, it's not really interesting. And of course, you can resign here. And here he did resign. This is of course hopeless against a player like Kasparov. Actually, he will probably lose a piece at the moment for the a pawn. Anyway, this was the plan with f3 e4 when it looked good. When we look at black side, we will see that maybe things are not so simple. But this line is very strong, and you should definitely know it, because it's like the minority attack when white starts attacking you with the b pawn. When white starts to build up with f3 e4, you can easily get sort of blown away without even having known what's going on. So be very careful. This was GM Talks with another episode on the Carlsbad structure. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. Welcome to GM Talks. We are continuing the series on the Carlsbad Pawn Structure. This time it's plans for white part 4. I can recommend watching the other 3 parts before you watch this one, but this can also stand alone. And today we will look at when white opens the center with e3, e4. And you could say that this is not really a plan. It's more of an option. that it's an option sometimes. It's smart for white to open the center when black is behind in development, or black's pieces are placed in clumsy situations or things like that. In general, white does not want to play e3, e4 because he's saddled with an isolated queen pawn on the square d4. Anyway, we're going to see a game here by Anatoly Karpov. Anatoly Karpov is a great player to learn from, so I will use him often in GM Talks, as you probably already noticed if you're a regular viewer. Anyway, let's get going. He's playing against Yusupov. It's Moscow 1988, and Karpov starts with the English opening c4, e6, and we are transposing into the Queen's Gambit declined. And here Yusupov plays bishop e7, and that's sort of a refinement on playing knight f6, because he doesn't want the pure to play against the pure exchange variation as we have seen in the earlier games, where after knight f6 white takes on d5 and plays bishop d5 and has very smooth development. As we have mentioned earlier, we will look more in depth on this variation in particular, but to be honest, this structure is important for all players because it can arise from a variety of different opening lines, including the Semislav, the Ragozin, the Queen's Gambit declined, I think the Nimzo-Indian, Grinfeld, and of course the exchange variation in the Caro-Kann. The bishop e7 is to avoid this line. White can take and play bishop f4, or he can play like he does here. This is not considered as critical because after c6, if white was to go e3 here, let's see it. This is considered not so typical because black is allowed to play bishop f5 and getting this bishop out here, and according to theory, black has already equalized when he gets his bishop here on f5. He has smooth development. There's no problem with this piece. And as we have seen in some earlier videos, in a lot of opening lines, white's plan is simply to make this bishop, the white squared bishop, homeless all over the board, so it cannot find a suitable spot. But here it's already fine, a great place, and there's probably nothing better for white than to exchange this bishop, and then black definitely only have good pieces. So to avoid this, white plays queen c2, taking control of the square. And this is part of the plan. If black just castle and white goes e3 and bishop d3, we will have the main line. And we have seen earlier that Karpov is a great connoisseur of this line. But Yusupov will have nothing of this. He's playing the most critical line. Anyway, this specific position is very critical for players who play the Semislav, because often they will get this when white tries to transpose into the exchange variation from the Semislav. They will get this position, and this move is good. The idea is simply white wants to play bishop f5. If black goes e3, bishop f5, it is known that black has already equalized. I think we have seen this in the game Bobotsov-Petrosyan in another Carlsbad video. Anyway, let's go on. e4. And this is the plan, and here it's very early. I might say that e4 is always something that you should be aware of with black and white. Always be aware of e2 or e3 to e4. Because this is an option that white have in a lot of different situations. What happens after take? Now black actually takes with the knight. But when these two pawns here, we put them with red, they disappear. White will have very free piece play with the pieces, as we can see that when on an open board, and he will also have an isolated queen pawn. And this can be weak if there are a lot of pieces exchanged and black is able to block it. He will probably later win it and might win the endgame. So white has to keep the activity going when he's playing e4. But sometimes it's just played so white can actually blast black off the board after e4. Anyway, he plays knight takes e4. And this is all known from theory. And bishop takes e7. Here, black has to be very, very careful because there is a trap in the position. If he were to take here on e7 with the queen, there is a big problem for him coming up. Boom! And it's hurting here on b7. And if the queen moves, the knight is lost, and it cannot go to e6 because of the knight e7. So if something like this then comes here, or sometimes you can even take here because there's definitely no check there because it's check. Anyway, so he has to play here king takes and check. And so we have the king in an open board, but it will probably find shelter on the king side. White has a lead in development. For sure, black has not developed any pieces except his king. But white also have this guy here that will turn out weak. For instance, if black was able to transfer this guy up here, then he will be probably already have control over the whole game because nothing much is happening. Also, black has some weaknesses on the dark square, but nothing too worrying. Okay, the best move for black here, according to theory, and it's supposed to equalize rather easily, is king f8. And just to play queen f6, king g7, bishop e6, knight around, and so on. And even white has a slight initiative in the beginning, but it will fizzle out, and black is okay. Instead, but this was not known at the time, I think. So Yusupov played bishop e6, which looks very normal. Just getting ready to queen d5 or king f8 and developing a piece, and how bad can it be? But the problem is the pin here is a bit annoying, and you might be settled with a weak pawn on this square, and this is something you don't want with your king sailing around in the center. So it's supposed to be more or less equal, but white is probably slightly better here. This was in 1988, and Karpov had lost his world championship title 3 years earlier, and he was hungry, and he was developing, and he was getting better, and he was probably at some of the best playing he ever did. It was in 1993, and this is 1988, but he was definitely better than when he was a world champion. So Yusupov was up against a giant here, and the giant really played well. So let's see the game. The thing to notice is this structure can arise a lot of the time. It's always white that chooses it, and he should be careful that if he does so, he gets an initiative. But it's always an interesting option, just playing maybe rook e1 and e4 in a lot of sort of standard situation can be a problem for black, and it's not so easy to defend. Okay, we go on with the game, and trying to exchange. White will have nothing of that. Of course, the ending is nothing. And all these moves are very normal. And here comes a very strong move, because Karpov senses that this is not about, black is not going to melt down here. But he does have this king. Oh, we will make that red. It's like this. He does have the king, who's in a difficult spot. Of course, white is always also having a king here that makes this rook not able to move, and probably the knight and the bishop and the rook and the queen is not enough to overcome black, who's fighting with all his pieces, even though this rook at the moment is not really participating. So he comes up with a strong move, the transformation of advantages, and Karpov was a master of this. This is something we will look into in a lot of later videos, how you demand an exchange commission whenever you change something when you're better. And here white does exactly that. He changes his lead in development into some kind of concrete attack, opening lines, and getting after this, the bishop comes in here with a nasty pin. The knight has gotten this square, the queen has gotten this square, the queen has also gotten this square, and this pawn down here is hanging, and we see that the king here, if it was on g7, black will probably be okay here, but it's standing on e7, and it will not be easy to find a good space. a6, avoiding losing a pawn, trying to solve the pin immediately. Comes a check, and king here. This was not part of taking on e7 with the king. The plan was, of course, to walk all the way to g7, and black is already very annoyed. And Karpov doesn't mind giving checks here and there and saying, okay, we've harassed you a little bit. Let's harass the queen a little bit more. And he's of course looking to queen h5, and here we see that black has problems getting his pieces to good squares. But white also have a problem. He wants to have the knight coming in. He wants to have his rook out, and here comes a strong move, h4, limiting the mobility of the queen somewhat, and making this square available. Notice that due to the pin here, there is no queen g4 or something like that. You just take it. So queen g8, and here comes knight d5, already threatening something like maybe rook e6. There's a check here, so we should be careful. But it could be sometimes, and this could come with a nasty pin. Rook hf8, he defends against it. Comes another nice little move, putting the queen back into where it doesn't want to belong. And we see that black's position is basically a total mess at the moment. And it's just a question of how white is going to get this attack getting through. And Karpov will be very careful to get enough out of it, not exchange into some ending that's slightly better. He wants more in positions like this, because with the king here, black should not be able to survive. Rook e7, queen b4. There is an x-ray down here, and there's also a threat here. Knight f6, defending here. Oops, that was not part of the moves we wanted to play. We wanted to show this was defended. Yes, check. Rook d7, queen f4, threatening, hitting this guy, and well, he's also hitting here. And notice that if he goes queen d7, rook takes e6 is a problem. So black is really a mess here. Here comes another great move, bishop d4, with the x-ray here, and we see that it's in general, you when you're attacking, you don't want to exchange pieces, but if the pieces give black a problem, then then it makes a good sense. And the thing is, black cannot take here, because then comes queen b8, checkmate. So his d6 is falling, and a check, and this has been a great attacking display. King d8, and here goes the neighborhood, and of course the rest is technique. And what a game by Karpov, just piling up the pressure, keep on pushing, and there was a knight hanging here, so you had to take with the knight, and this is of course totally winning. But you have to play really well in this position. d4, controlling the knight, rook e8, and d4, and here black resigned. There is nothing here. I think black can probably play rook. White can probably play rook g8 and rook d7. So there's no reason to continue here. He's a clear exchange up, and Karpov will not mess this up. He can always walk with the king from here to here. So there will be no checks anywhere where to harass it, and then the pawn will be picked up. So this was a great display of opening the center with e3, e4, and it's more of an option than a plan. It's not, in general, it's not what white sets out to do, unless black is doing a lot of luxury moves. Like in some lines, they're recently starting to play a6 and h6, and then it starts to become very tempting to try and blast him away, just opening the center, get all the pieces out, and run after his king. But of course, you do get an isolated queen pawn. Thank you for watching this GM Talks episode, the fourth part of the Carlsbad Pawn Structure with the white plans. Later we will get to the black plans, but next time it's getting more exciting because white will castle queenside. Thank you for watching. We have come to the Carlsbad Structure plans for white, pawn structure plan for white, part 5, where white throws caution to the winds and castle queenside, leading to an all-out battle where it will take place sharply on the king side, the queen side, and in the center. And it's a very demanding kind of chess. So let's get into it. With a game by Vladimirov versus Paul van der Sterren. And Paul van der Sterren is an interesting player for black because when he was an active player, he was one of the biggest experts on the Queen's Gambit declined. So whatever he does should be interesting because he knew his stuff very well. In this time he messes up. He's playing against Vladimirov, who was an expert on this line. D4, we will have a completely normal exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. And all these moves are very normal. Bishop d3, c6, and here Vladimirov already go knight e2. This is his system. We have earlier in part 2 we looked at plans for white with f3 and e4, which is often a part of the plan with knight e2. But white can also castle queenside, and he can also choose a completely different plan where he actually also may do like in part 1 with the minority attack. And one thing we should notice with the knight here is it can jump here, and this can be a bit annoying for black. But I think somehow the knight here with the option of going here, and maybe like in the Pillsbury attack, which we looked at in video part number 3 on the Carlsbad Pawn Structure. Knight bd7, queen c2, rook e8, and here comes castle queenside. Okay, what's going on? Suddenly the position completely changed because white does not want to play a minority attack now. He will like to attack on the king side. We notice that we have this usual battery here that is an annoyance. There's also, like we noticed, this plan, which is interesting, and sometimes when white castles queenside, it's with the pawn coming here, but often it will be with something like this. And I should probably make them red so we notice that they are messing up all the arrows like this. And black, on the other hand, would love to push this pawn far, this pawn far, and even open here. The problem with the c pawn is that if he moves it, he gives away the square b5, and this pawn might become weak. White will very often have to castle, move the king very fast. The king cannot stay in the c file for a long time. It is not safe in the c file. The game will give some sort of we'll see, but just this is a normal move again. Black is covering here and making room for this bishop to maybe go out. It could go to e6 or it could go g4, and it controls f5 and so on. and overprotects h7. Both sides will have to make some sort of combination of attack and defense. It will be an all-out struggle where it's not clear if you should play a safety move or you should attack. And this clearly favors the strong players. And in general, when white castle queenside in the Queen's Gambit, the best player will win. So if you are playing against a weaker player, but okay, it's not without risk for white to play this way, but it is very demanding positions, and the best player will usually win. First of all, white is starting here with h3, taking away this square and getting ready for g4. a5. This is also a normal move. White wants to attack on the queen side, king side, and black wants to attack on the queen side. In general, it's not really clear who's fastest. Usually black will land a little bit before white, but he will then lack enough resources to do some serious harm and will need to bring up more pieces. And white will also have to take some time out to get his pieces in order. d4. One move black can play here is sacrifice the pawn with a4. It's apparently not completely correct, as the latest, I think, rumors about this line. This, by the way, this game is from 1990, so it is an old game, and I think that this line is not played so much by white anymore because it's too dangerous. Black does look very threatening here on the queen side. King b1, like we said before, it's an important move. It has to be played. You have to get the queen and the king out of the c file at some point because something will happen there eventually. a4. Now the pawn is covered, and black is getting close to something. And here comes maybe a surprising move, knight g3, moving the knight away from the queen side, and getting ready to move this knight here before b4. If b4, white will have to take the pawn, and I don't think black will get enough compensation for it. Actually, the knight on a4 will help to seal the queen side. a5, getting ready for b4 and moving it before, because the problem is if b4 comes with tempo, then b3 also comes with tempo, and white is desperate to avoid opening lines. After b4, white definitely will move this queen so he can meet a3. If there comes, we'll see here, a3, you meet with b3, and b3, you meet with a3. So not to open more lines on the queen side is absolutely important. And as we see, white is not threatening anything yet, and black is already almost landing with his attack, but it's not that dangerous until he gets more pieces going with it. And white here take the pawn. This is actually theory, and the pawn sacrifice also theory, and all this is known. Bishop d7, and as we see, the c file is now open. And important thing to notice is this square is still important. It's almost always important in the Queen's Gambit decline exchange variation. So please notice this square, be aware of it. It's not important. And here, white only have one move that makes any kind of sense, and that is to go all the way back, because otherwise he will be hit by a pawn. Queen c2, b3 is already more or less over for white. His king will not be safe ever again. Queen c1. So as I said before, a3 meets with b3, b3 meets with a3. Okay, bishop e6. Also a normal move, hitting the bishop, getting the knight out, and there's no longer a problem here. And he he had to take because rook was coming, and knight e4 was coming, and the bishop was hanging, and queen d2, getting out of the c file sooner or later. And here black makes a huge mistake. He completely misunderstands the position somehow. I don't, or overestimate his attack, or I don't know, get nervous, I don't know what. Anyway, the correct move for black here is maybe knight rook c8, but another move is something like this, and black definitely have great compensation. There are squares here and here, there are bishops, and this king is not completely safe here. And black also has the bishop pair. So I would say after knight d5, black has definitely compensation for it, but he plays d6, and this was a mistake. Because it gives white time to, it's a big mistake, because after this, first of all, this square is no longer available. Second of all, this pawn is coming, and white will also have an attack and a pawn. At the moment, he just have a pawn, but if he also gets an attack, then it's almost too much. And g5. And as we see that it's already clear that black's attack has sort of led to a standstill. This formation of pieces is rather solid. So it was g6 was a really big mistake. And white is playing f4. It has nothing to do with the Pillsbury attack here. It's simply, since this pawn is not weak, it makes sense to push this pawn forward here where you have the majority. And he's already getting out of here, and f5 and bishop b5, and now something starts to threaten maybe this move or this move, and definitely something is going on here. So what do white need to do here? Well, when you're ahead on material, you exchange pieces, of course. Black does have the bishop pair, but if the position is not open enough for them to start working properly, it will not result in anything. Bishop b5, f6. So, boxing the king in here. h5, rook a7, knight f4. And as we see that it's actually more or less white that's attacking here, because this is probably threatening. Rook d8. Take, take, take. See, and here comes, boom, opening the ace file. This Vladimirov guy, he was actually, he doesn't, I don't think he's playing so much more. He's more like a trainer. He was I think he was the coach for, he was a second for Kasparov, and I'm not sure he got caught cheating, but he was definitely fired by Kasparov and accused of cheating. And I'm not sure it was correct. I don't know what the story is, but it was, of course, not very nice for Vladimirov. And I think he has coached a lot of Indian players and people in Asia in general. He was a very strong player when he was at the top. Here comes attacking and luring the bishop down, trying to get out. f7, and there's something coming in the f file. Rook f6 after bishop takes f7 is extremely annoying. Don't know what to do about rook f1. So and bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes d6, picks up. So let's just see it. This here will pick up this guy. And of course the king here is not good. f7 was a really nice interference. Bishop takes, rook f1 is also a really big problem because of here. So basically black is dead here, and his king gets squashed around, and he didn't get any attack actually. And rest is more or less, well, painful for black. This pawn might be coming. b5, and here you can just finish it. Boom, because of the pin. Oops. Oops. Sometimes. King c7, queen e7, king b6, queen f8. There's no check. There's just a monster pawn here, and pieces over here just huddled in the corner. So, what to take away? What to take away from this? it leads to, when white castle queenside, it leads to very, very fascinating, tense fights all over the board. We saw that both sides were playing on more or less both sides of the board, having to look at both the center and the queenside and the kingside, and sort of combining attack and defense. So very demanding, very difficult positions. And of course, we are playing for 3 results here. It's not, if you castle queenside, you cannot expect not to get mated at least once in a while with white. So this will definitely happen if you choose it. But it is very fascinating, and if black is not prepared for this kind of fight, it can be a great weapon for white. This concludes our series on white's plan. Next up, we will have black's plan in the Carlsbad Pawn Structure. And feel free to use the examples or the videos as study material or as teaching materials if you have students who could benefit from this. It is meant to be shared out there, and I hope you enjoyed this series and found it interesting. Of course, this is not all aspects of castling queenside, for instance, is not covered by this video alone. White has other plans. You can also have the knight on f3. There are many nuances. It's just to give a broad idea of the play. Especially in the minority attack, there are millions of things that can go right and wrong. We will look at especially black plans in the minority attack in the coming videos, where black has no less than 8 different plans. Anyway, thank you for watching GM Talks. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you remember to subscribe. Thank you. Carlsbad Pawn Structure, Part 6. Today we will have an overview over black's options against the dreaded minority attack. As you probably know, this structure here is the Carlsbad structure. And as we have mentioned many times, it can occur in the Queen's Gambit, declined, in the Caro-Kann exchange, Rogozin, Semislav, anything like that. So it's a very important pawn structure, and it's good to know what to do. You will get to play, if you play normal openings, you will reach this kind of position at some point. We will use this board as an example of white's plan and black's different option. Here, white's plan is basically to go forward with the pawns and make this pawn weak. This is the minority attack. And then black will have weak pawns. And black can respond to this idea in a lot of ways. Usually there will be a lot of pieces on the board. In general, the more pieces, the better for black in some way. It's not always clear. And nothing is set in stone in this Carlsbad structure. Anyway, we're gonna switch the scene now to the 8 different plans. You can get this in the notes, but you can also just write it down. And here we go. And we were called Boomer for having a white background, so now it's black, just for a little while. We will probably get another background anyway. Black options versus the minority attack, and he actually has, or she have 8 options. 8. That's a lot. Okay, so the first one is leave the queenside as it is. That is, just let white play the pawn forward and saddle black with a weak pawn. Meanwhile, black will try to attack on the king side. You could also do this, but with having the A pawns exchange, then you will have 1 weakness less on the queen side and might be able to use some of the open files over there, but you will also give white an extra open file on the queen side. You can prepare to meet B5 with
c5. We're going to see this in all these different plans. I'm going to show it, so don't worry if it sounds very abstract. It is kind of simple, but it will take some time to. And the thing is, the plans always intermix. Sometimes you should use one, sometimes you should use the other, and it all depends, like we have talked about before, like all complex things like in chess. It will depend on the exact position. And you can also do the same, meeting b5 with c5 with the a pawns exchange. And then you can play a6, and when white goes b5, you go a5, and then you will get the b4 square, usually to a bishop. We'll also look at this. You can also play a6 and take on b5 and play a5, and you will have a free a pawn, and but you will have a weak d pawn. We'll also look at this. Then you can put you can just stop white from doing anything and play b5, and you will get a weak pawn on c6, and e4 might be coming. But if you could put a knight on c4, usually this is not so bad. And then you can play in Tatarkova style, which I will call it, and play b6, and when b5 comes, you play c5, and you're ready to take back with the b pawn. Okay, these were the options, and of course we will later see some games where it is explained when to choose what, so you will have a clear idea when you are playing. Clear idea when you're playing. This is what we're aiming for here. It will take some time. It's not so simple, but you will be smarter about the Carlsbad structure after seeing this video and the 5 prior to this one and the one to come. Anyway, let's go to the board. We will switch scene again. Okay, so white go b4, and black just ignores it. Here we'll just move the king just to explain it, and we'll have this structure here. And of course there will be a lot of pieces on. This is just to simplify it. We see that black has a weak pawn here, and if it's exchanged versus the d pawn, then this or lost, this pawn will be weak. So in general, black structure is compromised. You don't want an isolated pawn like the pawn on c6, but if you can defend it, then you might be able to start an attack over on the king side, just to show where you might strike with your pieces. If you can if white uses all his forces to go after the pawn on c6. So usually white will have to take some prophylactic measures to stop black from getting a counterplay. It will lead to a full-flush battle. Okay, other options: b4, king f8, a4, a6, and here we just pretend b5 doesn't lose a pawn. Oops, it's white. And here we will have the same. Oops, yes, king f8, e8, and we'll have the same, but with the a pawn exchanged. This was option number 2, and here we see that the difference here is there are 2 open files here, and sometimes black will be able to occupy the a file and generate activity in that way, sort of combining attack and defense on the a file. Okay. Option, and it's like a lecture on the university, this here. Okay, and here we just move, and we will just to show so it doesn't lose a pawn immediately. It will look ridiculous. And b5 and c5. This was option 3, meeting b5 with c5. Usually this is not a real option because white will try to prevent it. He will, like the game we saw with Van Wely, he didn't allow c5, and we've also seen some Karpov stuff where he didn't allow c5, because in general, it's, even though what will result here is that the b pawn is no longer exercising much pressure, and black will get a weak d pawn. But, and this is the problem, this might not be so easy to attack as the c6, and it's not as weak. It will be easier to defend it. And this is the problem in isolated queen pawn positions. Usually white's pawn would be back here. And among other things, making the C file stronger. So in this situation, the problem is that black often get counterplay in the C file, and can use the C5 square, which is also annoying. So this plan is, in general, if black can do this, he's usually okay. It's not worse, because this D pawn is not so weak when white's queenside is weakened. Okay, next plan, number 4. B4, A6, oops, A4, King F8, and we'll just to not lose a pawn, and here maybe this, we'll play something like this, and here, and just to show it, this is the same structure, just with the A pawn exchange. I think this is probably a little better for white, because sometimes he can use the A file to try and attack this pawn down here on B7. And again, there is the counterplay on the C file, and there is a weak square, and we should probably make that red here. But this can also be weak, and sometimes it goes lost. So this is option number 4. Yeah. Then there is option number 5, and I hope I remember correctly which one it was. It was after B4, A6, A4, King F8, B5, take, and this time he took with the C pawn, and A5. And usually this is played with a knight coming here. The good news is that this pawn might be weak, but the bad news is often black will get problems in the C file. This pawn is weak, and if it's lost, white will have a very strong center. And even though this pawn is a free pawn, it's seldom that it gets to really rock and roll and go far. So this, I think this is possible, this plan, but it's not the best plan. And maybe this was not plan number 5, maybe this was plan number 6, because I just realized there is another plan here, and this is and after B5, just to go A5. So it's like plan number 1, but with the pawn on A5 instead of A6. The idea here is that this square might be useful for a black squared bishop. So if you have a black squared bishop you can put here, then you might be able to control the queen side. There was a famous game where Spassky played this against Kortschnoj, and Kortschnoj was very annoyed, and it was a quick draw. So this is another option. I'm a little bit skeptic about this. It seems fine, and it's very elegant just to go forward with A5 and get in the B4 square. But in general, if white managed to maneuver successfully here, he will win one of the pawns, and you will lose a horrible game. So I'm a little bit worried about this, and also the C takes B5, A takes B5, A5 solution. Okay, so we come to number 7. And that is simply on B4 to go B5. Maybe not in this position, maybe not. But here the idea is of course there will be no B5, and there will be a weak pawn on C6. Yes. Sometimes black can play A5, but usually white will get the A4 in. So there will be something like I'll play for A6, and there are some squares here that can be weak. There's also a plan for white to go E4, because this pawn now is quite weak, and in general is much weaker than the D pawn. But black, of course, also has some ideas. At the moment, his pawn structure is very solid, and he would love to put a knight, and we'll make it yellow here. If you could put a knight on c4, it will be a great piece. And if white takes it, black will have a strong pass pawn. And if it will be sheltering this weak pawn here, which we will make red like this. So and this, if carried out successfully, it's not so easy. Usually white is quite kind of careful not to allow this. He's kind of careful not to allow that black gets to set this up and put a knight on c4 without being sort of blown away on the king side or something. So, but if black successfully sets this up, it's usually it's kind of a good setup. And then we come to the last one. After b4, black goes b6. And this is more a Tatarkova style thing. And after something like b4, you'll play c5 and be ready to take back with the pawn. This is, of course, sort of elegant and can be good. It can be the problem for black is often that this pawn structure, white doesn't have to go b5. He can wait. He can go a4, a5, or he can go e4, or he can do something else with the pieces, and this pawn is pretty weak usually. So it has to be guarded, and guarding it will make black's pieces more clumsy. Anyway, this was the overview over the Carlsbad Pawn Structure, playing black against the minority attack. And there are many options, and it's kind of, I know if it's kind of overwhelming that there were the 8 options. We'll just have a look at them again, just so you don't forget. And yeah, it's easier when you see examples. So in the coming videos on the Carlsbad structure, we will have some examples on black using these options. But at least now you know they exist. This was GM Talks. Thank you for watching.
Defending against the minority attack in the Carlsbad structure. White comes charging with the b-pawn. What do you do? This is what we're going to look at. 2 games today with 2 different methods. If you watch the latest video on the Carlsbad structure, we showed there are 8 different ways that black can respond to the minority attack. We're not going to cover them all. You can probably find examples yourself, but this one is kind of, and this is method 1 in the first game. It's the game Viktor Kortschnoj against yours truly, Sune Berg Hansen here, and it's from the European Championship for teams, and it was in Warsaw in 2013. Viktor Kortschnoj is a strong Hungarian grandmaster, and I don't usually play e6, but I knew that he would never ever go into the French, so it was kind of makes sense to try and trick him a little bit, confuse him, and we ended up here. I decided somehow I didn't want to play the Nemso Indian, which I also play. So we have the pure Queen's Gambit decline exchange variation, and he plays Queen c2, not allowing e3, bishop f5, which I had played against Loek in an earlier game. Queen c2, bishop e7, e3, knight b d7. All this is very normal. This is actually the main line. And here white can play bishop f4, which is an interesting line. Instead he played castle, and another option here is to go knight h5, but g6 is what I usually do, and also did in my game against Navarra in the positional piece sacrifice. I don't know if you saw that video, but otherwise I can recommend it. And this is the beginning of the minority attack. White is getting ready for this, and black goes a5. And here maybe a5 is not the best move. I couldn't decide if I wanted to play a6 or a5, and this is always the problem with a5 is if white chooses a plan, for instance, trying to play something with f3 and e4, then black will usually counter with the c5. But if you have played a5, and it becomes very academic here, then this square will be weak. There will be a hole there. So this is kind of very deep chess. So maybe a5 is not the best move. Maybe black should play with a6. But this has other downsides. Okay, a3, very normal. White continues the plan of playing b4, knight e6, hitting the bishop, and he goes to h6, and that was a bit surprising. I think Navarro went to h4. Knight d7, and black is beginning the plan of to exchange this bishop. We have already seen this in a lot of settings. You want to exchange this bishop, and especially you want to exchange this bishop so as to get control over this square after b4. If you can land a knight there, it would be very nice. b4, take, oops, cancel, and bishop f5. And white starts to liquidate here, and b5. And this is, I think, theory actually. And we can see that black could play c5, but that doesn't look so good here because it will be very hard to cover d5. So basically, you will have a weak pawn here. So how do we play? You can say that as compensation for this weak pawn, black does have this bishop, which is black squared, and all the pawns are on white. So it will be a good bishop, and it will probably be better than one of white's knight. So black has, as compensation, a good bishop. And he also have the a file, and that's why I play rook a3. Of course, there is a pin on the queen, so I might be threatening this move. But there's also the option of covering this pawn by controlling the a file with queen a8. He takes, and play queen c2. It's always also very, very normal way getting out of the pin. The pin is very annoying. The queen is better on c2 than d3. It's also both not pinned, the knight, but it's also sort of eyeing this one. Here black plays a good move, queen a8. So I'm building a battery here. I'm covering this pawn here, and I'm getting ready to maybe play this move or this move to cover the pawn. Black is always trying to see if he can get some sort of counterplay, especially on the king side. If this one could be weak or this one could be weak, then he will go for it. Okay, rook c1, rook c8, all extremely normal. And white starts to, I don't know what he should do here, but what he does is maybe not the best. Bishop d1 and bishop d6. And I think black is fine here. He has the pawn on c6 is easy to cover. He has good pieces. King is safe. He does have a weakness, but it will be very hard to win it or to create a second weakness, which is the principle from Aljechin, that you need two weaknesses to win a game. And here it will be very difficult to create that second weakness that will give black enough problems so he will get into trouble. Rook c2, and I decided, okay, I can play rook b8. I can actually exchange one rook. That would be nice. Not two rooks, maybe, but at least one rook. And rook b6. And it's, of course, nice that black now can cover from the side, so he has control over both the b file and the c file. And now it's really covered, this one. It will take a long time to win it. This is, by the way, knight b1, knight bd2 is a common maneuver. It might be going here. Rook b5. And I'm trying to prevent it from go there. So after this, I'll go with just keep it. He was threatening to take on c2 maybe. No, he wasn't. But the 91 and just staying active. And basically black has no problems. And after some time, Eras decided that okay, it was not on this game that Hungary would win the match, but also they were starting to have good positions elsewhere, and they did win the match. We always lose to Hungary. It's a very annoying team to play against. They're just solidly good everywhere. Very very difficult to do anything against. Knight here, rook a1. Let's exchange one rook. Okay, let's not exchange one rook. And yeah, and if he ever moves something to e5, I would decide if I'm going to take it. But I will not exchange knights. This is something I don't like. So we ended up going back and forward here, and this was a very solid game by Black. White never really got around to anything. He did manage to get a weakness on this square c6, but apart from that, he couldn't make progress. And also the thing is, with this bishop bearing down here, there will always be some sort of a counterplay. And the other plan, except for winning this, was to play f3 and e4, and it will never materialize because Black is simply too active. You risk the rooks coming in and killing him. Okay, let's see the next game. We will not save this one. And this is Pal Torarinson versus Jakob van Glud in a Danish Grandmaster, and it's played in the Icelandic League. And Jakob van Glud is an expert in the black side of the Carlsbad structure, so it's probably a good idea to follow him. This is one of the methods I use to find games and find examples and find methods how to play, or variations, is to look up the experts and see what are they doing. What can I just copy it, because it's easier to copy than find something yourself. Okay, let's go fast forward. And this is and here we have as we know, this is the completely standard. He doesn't play, and this is interesting, this is Van Glud's line. He doesn't play knight f8. He keeps the knight on d7, and then here you go knight s5. This is interesting. Of course, one of the idea is this bishop is trapped, so it has to go. Another idea with knight s5, of course, to go here and then and exchange this guy, as we have already seen. Common maneuver. Bishop e7, queen e7, and white goes on with the minority attack. We have seen this many times. He's ready for getting this going and making this a weak pawn. a6 and a4, and here comes Van Glud's pet line, knight b6, and we see that, of course, the knight would be like to settle here if this bishop was not here. So Black's next move would probably be something like and here, and then he will have strong knights controlling the center. And with the knight on c4, there will be no attack on c6 because you can't get the rooks going. And there is also here, and it's not so easy to do something about. Okay, b5, and this is another method of defending against the minority attack, is to take and c5. And this is what Van Glud usually does with Black, trying to set this up. And it's kind of interesting. You sort of, well, I don't know. I think Black has already equalized. The problem for white is that this pawn is now actually getting weak, and at the moment Black is threatening c4 and bishop f5, so he has to take. And we see that in this was called an ICQP position, where white has an isolated queen pawn. It's usually known as good for white because Black has a weakness. The problem for white is that his position on the queen side is not so stable. This pawn is in the way of his pieces, and the c file is a problem, and Black controls this, and white cannot get it back with the pawn because it's gone sailing away. So here white Black is already fine. Plays rook bishop d7, and the thing is also that this pawn is probably much weaker than this pawn. So Black is equal here. They go into the ending, and the ending is at least okay for Black. and 95, 96. He doesn't mind. He don't mind. Doesn't mind that this get exchanged. H4, and I think White is losing control of the game. I don't know what H4 does. And this also makes no sense. And Black is just playing the ending like you're supposed to do. Centralize the king, getting ready to attack something when you're all set. And he took, and that bishop was not very strong, but of course it should be okay. Keeping the knight out, but the thing is, the problem is that White doesn't have. He's playing like he have more pieces, and he doesn't. And there's this g4 is, yeah, it's fine, but the knight is just coming to e5, and Black is better. So Black has slowly but surely taken over the initiative, and it's kind of instructive the way Van Cleve does do this, getting the rook in and attacking the bishop, and here it looks probably dangerous, but this knight is out of play and the pawn is hanging, so you can't get, if White could get to this in, it would be fine. Instead, it's just, and the king is active now. So very instructive game. By the way, Van Cleve has excellent technique and he has no problem wrapping this up. We will see this, and of course he's a much stronger player than Tora Rinson. And there goes the pawn. Oops. And he resigned. He was getting depressed, I think. He's getting mated. The thing is, the problem is this, and check. And the other way the knight goes. And here, after this, there's mate in next move. So this was another way of defending against the minority attack. And we have seen when White do have success with this, when White's success is usually linked to being a little bit more patient. And here, of course, if we go back, we see that here b5 is probably premature. You should not play b5 when Black can play c5. Then Black is instantly fine. This was examples of defending against the minority attack. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are a lot of other videos on the Carlsbad structure. We are becoming expert here on the channel. So please like and subscribe, and see you again soon. Thank you for watching. So, not only defending in the Carlsbad structure, but sometimes even counterattacking. The minority attack is a strong thing, but the Black also have chances on the other side of the board. So today we're going to see some examples of Black getting more active, and where are the weak spots in White's position. It looks a little bit like a fortress, but it's not. Get ready for more entertainment than in the last Carlsbad structure video. Pawn structure. Yeah, this is Anish Giri against Jakob Van Cleve. As we mentioned in the last video, Jakob Van Cleve is one of the Black heroes in the Carlsbad pawn structure. He does not allow it easily, but here we get the main line, and here it goes knight f8. Castle, bishop e6. In this position, we usually have seen the move g6 with the plan knight e6, knight e7, bishop f5. This is all common knowledge now. This is another move. It's definitely playable and maybe interesting. Just developing the bishop, connecting the rooks. White goes on with the minority attack. And Black exchanged the bishop. I think maybe White could consider bishop f4 here. This is an interesting move. He decided to take. Take, b4, a6, a4, knight b6. Okay, and we actually saw something similar in the last game. And what's Black's plan? The Black's plan is when b5 come, we can see that if White were to go b5 here, he would take, and play c5. And Black is already fine. The weak d pawn is offset by the weak b pawn, and Black will have actually get the initiative in the c file, and so there's no problems here at all, and I would probably prefer to be Black in this position. So White did not want to play b5 here. Maybe he should find something. Maybe he could consider something like this, and maybe knight f4 and getting ready for b5 without allowing c5. Instead, he decided that okay, I'll play a5, and he's with that he's putting all the pawns on Black, and he has a white squared bishop, which is kind of cool. And also this this bishop will probably be bad. The problem is that b5 is very unlikely to ever happen. So White usually combines this move with what we'll see soon, with the other plan of opening the center with e4. Knight c8, and it's important the knight goes here because, as we have seen in an earlier video, the knight is very good here. It controls a lot of squares, and we see it here. It's nice. It's sitting there. All the things in the world you're interested in, it controls from this square. And knight c5, rook into the center. And maybe White should take, I don't know, it doesn't feel right to take, but on the other hand, after knight d2, bishop goes back, and here it is part of the game on the king side, but it's also covering here, and it's actually much better than the knight that cannot do anything really. White's plan is to try and play e4. He does have a majority on the king side, but it's not so easy to set in motion. Here he goes rook b8, and now comes a strong move, an important move, queen h4, just getting ready to attack on the king side. And already Black is better, and here White completely panics, or he simply misses Black's reply. He plays f4, which is a disaster. And after and here Black has a typical combination: take, boom, knight comes, just queen g3 is fine. Yes, take, check, of course, check. And you could take a perpetual check, but you get 3 pawns, and White's position is in shatters here. Black has a strong initiative. All the other pawns are likely to drop off, and these kind of positions almost always go badly for White. It's just not possible to play them, and it's very easy to be Black. Okay, take, queen d2, queen d4. Now Black has 4 pawns for their piece, and b4 is hanging, and White's pieces are uncoordinated, which is very important also. Rook e8, rook comes, and if this knight, when this knight will get close to the king, it will be over, I'm sure. And it comes, and here comes the rook. I don't think White had a good day here, because it's just getting worse. And check. And yeah, White blundered. He took here, and White, after this, he gave up. The problem is Black will give a check, and then he will take the queen. So something like this, and then he will take the queen here. So this was a nice little game showing that how Black can, if he can get his queen and his pieces to the king side, then the structure might have some sort of weaknesses there, especially e3, d3, d2, h3, which we're going to see in the next game, where Black also is allowed to do another of the 8 setups against the minority attack. Okay, next game, and this is Goryachkina versus Michael Adams in the European Online championship final, club finals. It's an English team versus Circle de Chech from Monte Carlo, and which had only was an all-woman team. And here we see this Alapin variation again. Adams apparently think it's quite a good too. So maybe we should use it as the GM talks repertoire for black. It would make sense. It also seems, since it seems to be fine for black at the moment. I've been playing in a little bit in Blitz, and I don't see that many problems for black really. So maybe we can do that. It is easy to learn, and after all, we now are experts on the Carlsbad structure. Bishop e6. White could play queen b3 here, and black plays rook a7, covering the pawn, and taking on f6 is actually probably not good. So, but this is more normal, and all these moves have been played before. I even played them with black. And this is also a normal move, and white would actually love black to take, because this double f pawn are very strong and keeps control of this. Plus, this bishop get into trouble. So black will not take, but he will play like this, and maybe white should just play queen d2 and say, okay, if you're gonna exchange them, then it will be on my terms. So I think this might be wrong. And I think black has already equalized, so he's fine here. A3, kind of a weird way of preparing the minority attack. The normal way would be b4, but it's also, black has already gotten all these things ready for it, so it seems that maybe it's not gonna be that successful. Rook e8, that's also very common move, b4, and now black plays a very interesting move, the kind of move that we have discussed also in the series on the overview over what the black options in the Carlsbad structure. He plays b5. Okay, so what's the plan? The plan is simple. Boop and boop. And if white cannot prevent this or play e4, then it's usually very good. If he can't prevent it, or e4 comes with force, then it's not good. Here, white can't even play a4, which is normally also another thing you would love to do. And the pawn is bolstered here, so it seems like a good idea. Oops. Knight d2. I'm not sure about this. White has a plan to put the knight here, but the knight here is not nearly as good as the knight here, unfortunately for poor white. So they both did what they were going to do, and here comes trouble. Black to move. And we just saw a game where black was able to attack, and we are going to attack the same squares. So what to play here? It's kind of a difficult exercise. I showed it to some students, and they had big problems finding it. Black plays this move. This is, of course, the move you want to play. If white can't take back, then you're just better, and so he has to take back. And the idea is, of course, this move. Boom. And we have this same square on d3. The good thing about this is that if white can take on e3, and he can't, I'm going to show you in just a second, then black will get 2 pawns and a better pawn structure, and a rook for 2 minor pieces, and this should be good for black. It's not always good for black if the position is different, and for instance, if white can get these minor pieces to attack, then it would be probably good for white. Okay, if he takes, then of course you have a draw immediately, but I'm sure he would not accept the draw. Instead, he would probably play here. There is no counterplay. Notice that this is a very, by the way, a common theme is met by mate here. So this is something you should be careful about. How do you get the pieces? So rook a2 looks like the most sensible, but then comes the knight in, and black is threatening this, and rook d3. Rook here comes, and here he is actually completely busted because he can't take his mate in two, and the threat is this. So black wins material, and it's game over. So he didn't take, he plays queen f3, but then it was kind of easy for Adams. Just took here, g6, a5, and notice this is a little prophylactic. He could not play a5 immediately because of knight b7. So that's why he played rook e7. It's a nice multifunctional move. It covers this pawn that might be attacked, might not be attacked, but we like to cover these pawns. It covers this square, and it prepares for a doubling of the rooks on the e file. So you cannot ask much more from one move. And I'm sure that most grandmasters would just play rook e7 without thinking. Knight a5. And white is hoping for some tricks on the king side. Take, and here comes the rook from the other side, pinning the bishop here, so making it impossible to move. And there's a little trick here, opening the position for the rooks. There's a pawn hanging on e4. And well, and the check here is nothing because the rook is on e7. This one is threatened. You can't play rook d1, and you just take it, and I'll be able to exchange into a one rook ending. So I played rook c5, rook e5 coming. This might be coming. Rook d1, rook d5, king e1. Exchanging the rook is often a good idea. If the opponent only has one rook, just exchange it, and then he will have problems with the files. And well, and here white wins material with this move, and black gave up. Knight c5, queen takes b4 is just curtains. So this was the b5 plan, and a nice attack by Michael Adams. So playing the Carlsbad structure is not just sitting defending this weak pawn on c6. Sometimes you will get a kingside attack. Isn't that great? Thank you for watching GM Talks. The Carlsbad Pawn Structure series is continuing. We have a little more things we have to cover for black, defending against different other plans, but we are getting there. Thank you for watching. What to do when white goes f3, e4 in the Carlsbad structure. This is also a plan that you can risk running into when you're playing the Caro-Kann exchange variation. Suddenly black go f6 and e5 and try to move you down in the e file. So today you're gonna learn what to do. Basically, we're gonna discuss some concept about the nature of the position as well. So I think this will be a very instructive chapter on the Carlsbad structure. So let's get down to it. We are in 2015. I'm black against Jens Christiansen, who was a veteran of what was called a senior world champion at some point, and is a grandmaster. And he plays d4, and he likes this system for white. And I had prepared this antidote with my second, Nikos Nitirlis, also a famous author of chess books, playing e4, e5 with black, and d4, d5 with black, and the terrace defense and things like that. He helps a lot of grandmasters. Anyway, this is all the main line in the Carlsbad structure. Queen's gambit declined, orthodox, and here it comes. White's plan is simply to castle and then go f3, e4, and getting ready to blow black away in the center and on the king side. One thing that is a common rule is black tries to meet f3 with c5. But in this, and especially when you're white in the exchange Caro-Can, this is what you do. You simply go there, and because f3 weakens e3 and d4 and the black squares, you will usually counterplay as compensation for this pawn that will be isolated. Okay, this is rook e8 is a normal move. Castle, knight f8, and white can still change plans and go back and play something like rook b1. And try for the minority attack, but with the knight here it's a bit different. I think the knight is better on this square because it has more influence in the center and can jump here as we saw in the Pillsbury attack. Okay, f3. And this is basically the move. White is getting ready to play e4. At the moment he's not completely ready for it because e4 takes. Knight e6 is annoying, and if bishop goes back, knight comes here. So he has to be a little bit wary about the black square. So he starts with king h1. By the way, g6 is not the only move. I think Van Gloed plays something like this with the plan and to go here and c5, and this is of course also a viable option, but I have prepared this system with the Nickers, and I like this idea with the g6 just blocking out these guys here, or girls if you like, and knight here, and bishop goes back, and often white will put the bishop here where it supports the center and is ready to swing back to the king side. Notice it's not just because he wants some place to hold the bishop. He was trying not to get any exchange, so it will later join the attack. It's long. Okay, and here comes black's idea, and it looks very anti-positional. And I remember when Nichols first showed me, I said, come on, I'm not gonna play that. And then he was very convinced that this was the right idea. So here it comes, b5. Okay, on a sort of a positional ground, I hate the move because of this one and this square, and also it looks terribly anti-positional. Okay, so what's the idea? The idea is you have to, with f3, black's counterplay has to come from this move. This is the move that will bring counterplay. Otherwise, you will not get counterplay and you will be slaughtered on the king side. So you need to get some counterplay in the center. The problem at the moment is this knight here is a monster against c5. White will get access to this square. He will attack this one, and also there is no weak pawn on e3, and sometimes white can just switch plans and go with the g pawn because his position is so stable. So b5 is to first remove the knight and then play c5. That sounds far-fetched, right? So let's see. Okay, a3, preventing b4 at the moment. Bishop b7. I like the idea that after he played the king here, the bishop is, there's a lot of pawns, but as we will see, they will disappear. And this is the kind of things I kind of like. Here also he could play e4, but then I probably just have knight h5 and I will trap his bishop. Oh, he will just lose a pawn on d4, sorry. But in sometimes black plays knight h5 on e4, getting this square, which is not what white would like. That's also why maybe this constellation here is not the best with f3. If white can get away with having the queen on d1, it's actually better on d1 because sometimes it wants to be in this square. Okay, I think some Grandmaster played this against me in a blitz game. Rook 81. The big question is, does the rook belong here or here on this square? It's not completely clear. But here it, of course, just like I like my bishop on his diagonal, he likes his rook on my queen's diagonal. Okay, a5. So black's plan is taking shape. He will play b4 and kicking this knight. And kicking this knight is essential, but also kicking it without losing control over this square. And that's why this knight is very important for black. Queen c1, and that was already a weird move by Jens Christiansen. I think his plan is to go is to be able to play e4, and then the queen will swing here and getting ready to attack. It's probably not very likely it will happen. And also on b4 he has knight a4 and is covering this pawn. So it looks like he had a lot of ideas, but basically it's a lost tempo. I think I didn't like the move. Rook c8, and this is getting down to business. We're ready for this. Another idea with the b4 b5 b4 plan is that black will sometimes be able to go here and exchange this one. And exchanging that bishop is of course good for black, because all his pawns except the pawn on a5 is on white squares. Okay, here comes the pawn, here comes the pawn, and we are on with the game. And we see that here, this was the idea, looks kind of good for white, but black has c5, blowing the center up and at least equalizing right now. White's dream, of course, was to go something like this, and then this, and this, and just slaughter black's kingside, but it's not gonna happen. Black will just take on d4, and the queen will be hanging, and everything is just a mess. So he decided, okay, I don't have any weaknesses, so maybe I should just do this. And I'm hitting the queen here, so he has to go here, and here I can probably take on e4. I played this move. He played here, and here I probably can take again. I played this move, played here. We are moving around. This was a mistake, by the way. I think here the position is more or less equal. None of us has really big weaknesses. My king is pretty safe, and I'm always very scared of getting blown away in these kind of positions. So I'm very I really like the system where it has a very low chance of happening. You have a pretty safe king the most of the time. Queen d2 and knight e5, and now black is taking over. This last move was a mistake. Bishop c2, and here I played a very weird move. I don't know why I played this move. I have a lot of good moves. I think just taking here is just a clear advantage for black, actually. So the black has clearly won the opening duel, and this plan with b5, b4 is recommended. Of course, the circumstances have to be right. They have to be right. But in general, I think it's a good plan. And in this main line, it is the right plan. And I've seen that even the top players are starting playing this now. So I think they also watch correspondence games just like Niggers does. Okay, queen c8. By the way, this is the Larsen trick. I like to have the queen on the same color as his king. That sounds far-fetched, but sometimes this gonna come, and the queen's gonna come all this way down here. So it's maybe not completely crazy. Okay, rook, and of course black is very active and clearly better here. Take, and he's actually winning material now because it's black to move. And a safe move would be something like bishop f6, but there is actually an even better move, and that is boom, because there's a double attack on this knight here. The problem is I actually had to calculate very far here because he will of course make this intermediate move, attacking the queen, attacking the rook especially. And after bishop d5, best move, he will take, and go here and start to become active. Okay, and this is where I missed the big win. I could have won with bishop e4. I played bishop a8. I was spending a lot of time, and Christiansen was playing pretty fast, and it was a bit annoying. And I thought, okay, after knight takes f3, I'm just gonna win. It's winning. Come on, old man, just resign. And he of course does not resign. And here I played bishop e4. I didn't play bishop e4, but this would have been very good. I was afraid of this move, getting out of the. Notice that the idea, of course, is this, and this one is lost, and black is 2 pawns up. But what about this move? And the trick is this, and the knight has given away this square. Something like that is very difficult to see. And after this, check here, and bishop d4, and this was all complicated. Attacking the bishop before taking it, so there's no double attack. Rook d5, attacking this one, and take, and here, and after this, black is totally winning. This is what we call a rook with a view. It's kind of a artist project, right? Anyway, this is winning for black, and I should have played this. I played the bishop a8, much more natural move than bishop e4, but actually I needed the knight to get on a bad square where it could not enter the game, because after this move, white became very active, attacking. Oops, that was a little bit far here. And okay, I'm defending, but he's still getting very active. And notice that he's got the C file under control now, and that was not the case after bishop e4. And also I need to activate my rook, and he's of course attacking the knight who's defending this pawn. So I got the bishop out to here, but his position is extremely active. So the table has more or less turned. Of course, black is a pawn up and should be better, but here I made the mistake. Bishop d8, just trying to get ready for bishop b6 maybe, and after this, or rook c7, which was also the plan. The problem is he has this strong move, and he's just exchanging everything. And the problem is this pawn now. This pawn that made him a lot of trouble in the earlier phases of the game is now a weakness. So after a few more moves like this, the problem with the knight is this knight is sort of dominated by this bishop. And I'm very afraid that because his king is coming very fast, so I have to get my king going very fast as well. And I just simply have to give the pawn up, because if he gets the b pawn, I might lose. And here, well, and we agreed a draw. It is a draw. There's nothing to do. I can't. I have to keep his king out of the queen side, and my pawns are on the wrong square on the king side, and so on. So it's a clear draw, and it's equal. But this system, just g6, knight e6, and b5, and ready for b4. Sometimes the bishop actually goes to d7 and not b7. It depends a little bit, because it can annoy a knight on a4. But you will look into this at a game. But this is a system for black against f3, e4, and white is not so happy about this system anymore due to this. So that's a good tip for you. Thank you for watching, and remember to watch the other episodes of the Carlsbad Structure and become a real expert, right? Thank you. Learning from the expert. That's always a good idea. So if you find an expert, just take what they can do and copy it. And that's what we're going to do today with the Carlsbad Pawn Structure that we have been having a lot of videos here on GM Talks. And today we're going to look at one of the heroes from the white side. It's Arkell, English Grandmaster, a nice guy who's got a good sense of humor. He recently wrote a book about his endings, and he is a very good ending grinder and been around for a long time. He's also one of those guys who have played the same openings his entire career. And the good thing about that is that you become a real expert. You know all the nuances, you know all the small detail, and The bad thing is that first of all you become a sitting duck. People can prepare for you because they know what's going to come, and with cloud Indians it can be pretty scary. But another problem, and that's probably a bigger problem, is if you play the same openings over and over again, you won't develop. There will be parts of your game that will not that you'll not be able to master because it's not part of the positions you get from your opening. So I can say that you should learn from these guys, but don't be them. And you can copy the good things they do and just leave out the bad stuff. That's what I would recommend in general. I'll just try and see if I can make my face go. So we're gonna see a game today with Keith Arkell against Johan de Wolf, and it's played in Vlissingen Open in 2003. And Keith is white, and he is connoisseur on the white side, and he seems to love this system. And the funny thing is here, this is not considered critical, because in this, when white plays this way, black gets to play the bishop out to f5. And that is supposed to give him equal position pretty easily. But he doesn't mind. He says, okay, I will just love this structure and I will do well from this structure. And of course, after maybe 30 years of experience in this structure, he is doing pretty well with these things, even though in theory he has no advantage at all. Okay. And here, this could also arise from the semi-Slav, and if you're happy with this position, you can probably get it in a lot of games with white, because this is supposed to be comfortable for black. Bishop d5 is also, and here he doesn't mind, he just plays e3 and allows bishop f5. If you remember some of the previous videos on the Carlsbad structure, you saw that black had to do all sorts of things, getting a knight to d7, getting a knight to this square, to be able to play this move, to exchange the bishop on d3. And here, white, well, he says, okay, you can sit on f5, I will wait a little bit. And here he does something interesting. He just takes, and we can also remember that this is kind of the idea in the Capablanca formula. Just take with the bishop, getting rid of that, and put the pawns on white, b4. And this is the idea. You get b4 with a tempo, and black has, of course, two bishops here. Oops, that was not the intention. I'll just go back. b4. Here, and they are, of course, kind of strong, but it is a rather close position, and at the moment it's not really clear what that you can exploit the bishop pair. But in the long run, you would prefer the bishop pair, and that's also why white, after castle, said, okay, I'll exchange one of the bishops. And Keith gets this kind of configuration of pieces, and in a lot of games, where after this black has to take, otherwise he's will be worse because the bishop is strong on d3. Here, this is sort of the main position of the way Keith plays this, and he knows it very well. He knows that black has this bishop, which is sort of, at the moment it looks silly, but it would be a strong bishop standing here. So that's where it's going in general. In the meantime, white's plan is very simple. Get this up, get this here, take it, and stay safe, and then later exploit the pawn weaknesses on the queen side without giving away counterplay. And you have to be sort of flexible as white. You can't just burst ahead and said, okay, I'll give you a weakness and then I'll win the weakness and then I'll win the game, because that's usually not going to happen. Black will get serious counterplay if you're not careful. But this is also part of Keith's way of playing, that he's simply waiting. He's very good at just playing technical chess, just slightly improving his position, keeping black under pressure, and eventually something will drop. And of course, he's a good, what we call, patzer killer, and in this game he's got much more rating. Black is 21-49, so he's supposed to win, but the way he does it is very instructive. Okay, Let's see some moves. A6 prevents b5 immediately, castle, bishop e7. And this all makes sense because white's idea is a4 and b5, and the bishop wants to be on this diagonal, as we saw that it should be a good diagonal. All the pawns are on white, and it's a good bishop. It controls these squares, so if a knight lands there, you can take it. And in general, but of course, black's attacking power is limited due to the exchanges of two minor pieces. And that, of course, helps white in general. But we also saw in the the Bobosov-Petrosian game, that having just two and one knight each is not good for white, because then you cannot get this in without giving this square away. And you should, if you haven't seen that video, you should go back and see it. It's a must-see video for the Carlsbad structure, even though it's not really part of the series. Okay, covers the pawn, knights, and white goes on with the plan, which is of course b5, take on c6, and get a weakness, and bishop d6, and black fulfills the idea he started, and white gets ready to attack the pawns. And yeah, this is sort of the only plan. Black is trying to find out how to attack on the king side. That's where he has his chances. He could play something like b5, but then white will counter with something with e4, and then maybe it's white who will attack on the king side. So black says, okay, I'll try to get my queen nearer to what Jakob Aagaard would call the kill zone, or near the king, so as near as possible. And b5, here comes, take, and black says, okay, I have to do something here, because he's coming to this pawn will be weak here. So what to do? Okay, counterplay. This, of course, weakens a lot of squares, but it does also signal an attack. This knight is a very strong knight, and it defends everything. So it has to go if black wants to do anything. He wants to attack h2 or f2 or something, and take, all normal. Knight e2. And white is clearing this for this file, and he's also getting ready because he knows this will come, and then these squares will be weak. So the knight will get some move, some room there, and also you're getting knight in for the defense. d4, attacking the knight. Rook a3. Black is also attacking. Rook b3. Defending. Rook fa8, and you should be a little bit wary here. You cannot take on c6. There's a check on h2, so the pawn here is indirectly defended by the queen due to this check if he takes on c6. Okay, knight here. Nice little move, covers this and getting ready for the knight here. And then we see that this d5 may be an aggressive move, but when you move pawns, you always also creates weaknesses. And this is a general rule. This is a general rule. Whenever you move pawns forward, you create weaknesses. And here, these two squares are looking a little bit juicy for the knights. So because black cannot really regain control of them if white takes over. Knight here, plan is of course to go here. And we can also see that black is obviously banging on, hoping that tactics will save the day because he cannot take it because the queen is hanging here. So this is not in trouble anyway. But Keith don't mind. He just keeps on with the plan. Knight comes in, and we see that the bishop is blundered. And what Keith is very sort of interested in is that black's pawn weaknesses remain. here and here. So at the moment he's just doing prophylactic moves to avoid any kind of trouble, and if black's attack does not arrive, then white will win. Okay, knight comes in, take, and let's exchange queens. And a player like Keith, they like to exchange queen. And check, and here we see this with the idea to go here. So and maybe attack this one, but this looks a bit annoying for black. So he took here. And we see that for every move, the attacking potential is sort of disappearing, and the weaknesses remain. Of course, there are still some problems with the back rank. A check on this down here could be fatal, so white has to be careful. But still, it seems okay. Can we and here white realize maybe it's actually black's king that's in sort of a trouble. So so he doesn't want to exchange queens, and getting ready for a knight jump to h5 here, and eyeing this pawn as well. 6, and getting rid of that, and that solves a lot of problems for white, because it always also gives air to this king. It needs air to be this back rank mate is very annoying, because white is getting close to that part of the game where he might win something, and then you don't want any kind of counterplay. So it's much nicer to have sort of everything covered and then win it, especially when you have a much superior structure. Here he doesn't have superior pieces at the moment. Okay, the rooks are not yet in the game, but they will enter the game. We can see that white, of course, would have loved to play this, but unfortunately this is hanging. Okay, let's see, go on, take, and he has to cover the weak back rank, and that we see that this g5 had serious consequences for the structure. Black ended up, he wanted to attack, which of course is a noble idea, but the problem is he ended up not only having these weaknesses, but also having weaknesses here and here, and these squares are also weak, and the king here in general is, let me make that green, is in some sort of trouble. The knight is in a very nice position on d3, so white is all for choice here. Okay, queen jumps in, and black still tries to get some attack. h5, h3 would be nice, just to get something going, but of course Keith will just keep control with a move like this. And I noticed that I had to look through a lot of games with Keith in this line, just to find something that I thought suitable. It was also a request that we will look at one of the heroes here, and I noticed that Keith liked this structure with the pawn on d3. That it feels kind of safe, unless you have to get into trouble on the white square. Okay, now here comes the rook, and here black. Okay, I resign my ideas of getting an attack, and we are ready to see the ending. And this kind of ending is, of course, what Keith was after playing this line. It's a horrible ending for black. He has 3 weak pawns, and white has a very healthy, nice structure. You can just look at the structure and see that, okay, it's doomed for black. So black will try to see if he can make a draw, maybe by losing only 1 pawn and then reaching some sort of drawn ending theoretical draw, and white will try to avoid that. And actually black do pretty well here. It's not rook here, getting ready for something, and getting rid of one pawn, and covering this. So black got rid of one pawn, and in these kind of positions, a general rule is that the more pawns that disappear, the better for the defending side. White would love to maybe, well, I think the knight and rook here is an ideal constellation for white, because they can work well together, and white's structure is so good that black will not be able to coordinate his knight and rook for an attack, while white is simply, this knight can just well, jump around. It can do like this, and maybe back again until something drops. Okay, we will see. It's kind of instructive. Okay, the king has to come as well. It makes sense. And attacking this pawn twice. And black says, okay, but I get rid of one more pawn, and that's kind of a success for black, because after this he's only behind with one pawn. It's a isolated pawn, but white only have 2 pawns left. So if you can get this to a rook ending, then it would be a draw. And a knight ending might also be drawable. It's probably a draw as well. So the only thing that makes this interesting is that white has rook and knight. But of course, strong players, especially players strong technically, are usually very good with rook and a knight, or rook and 2 knights, or 2 minor pieces against in the different constellation. It's always very instructive. We will later on this channel see Bent Larsen do an amazing game with rook and 2 knights versus rook and 2 knights. But that's for a later video. And here black also has some problems with the king, and the knight is and white is very patient here. He has time, and suddenly there might be a serious threat here, because this threatens check. King can only go here, and then another check here will win the knight and the game. So he goes back, but that's a little bit clumsy. Notice that black is doing well by keeping the rook way well away from this knight, because often black will get into trouble for some sort of a fork. Okay, white plays king f3, and that's kind of sneaky. The idea is to mate white black by this move, and if take, then comes rook d5, and black king is gone again. Okay, and this is starting to be a theme here. King e5, rook d7. Black has some problems coordinating. The knight doesn't have any good squares. It doesn't want to go to c4 because it's lost there, and at the moment he can't even move it, because if he moves it, it's rook d5 and it's checkmate. So he moved the rook, and then comes another check, and here, and back, and here, and king here, taking away the square, and actually threatening mate here. That's kind of a nasty mate. And notice that moving the knight is not really optimal. It's not certain that will save poor black because of a check and check. So f5, but that's creating another weakness. And rook a6 also makes a lot of sense. The knight has to stay because of the check. But now the king comes into a problematic position here, rook, and this pin is lethal. And this must have been kind of a nightmare for black. And here, what white to play? Can you find a good plan for white here? See, the knight can't move. The rook can move, but it can only move to this square. Unfortunately, this knight cannot improve, so it can take away all the squares. So they are sort of idly placed. But there is the problem of the king here. Maybe we can do something about that. So what do white do here? You get 10 seconds. 10, 9, so on. Boom. Okay. King move, great. Or what? The problem for black is after the natural move, rook a6, white goes king h3. And we see that the trap is shutting on poor black. It comes here, knight f4. And unless white moves the knight, black will play, white will play, black will play, unless black moves the knight, white will play rook d6, mating the king. So in this position, Johan de Wolf resigned, and Keith had won another great game in the Carlsbad Pawn Structure. This was GM Talks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you soon again. Thank you for watching. Learning and copying the best or the experts is a very good strategy in many aspects of life, and not also in chess. Today we're going to look at the Carlsbad structure once again, and we're going to see some games of a deceased Bulgarian Grandmaster, Julian Radulski. And I discovered Radulski and his expertise in the Carlsbad structure when I was preparing for him at Politiken Cup. And I realized that he was really good at these positions, and he knew them very well, and he had his own ideas. And this is often the case, that I find people this way, that I'm preparing for them and see, oh, I don't want to play this against him. Oh, no. I played something else. I played some ready setup, and he beat me in a very nice game. He was a very strong player. He unfortunately got ill and died in 2013. So this is a slight tribute to him. He's not that well known, even though he was pretty strong and was part of the national team of Bulgaria. So Julian Radulski as black in the Carlsbad structure. Here it's from 2003, a game from Serbia, and Radulski was a very classical player. With black, he always answered d4 with d5 and e4 with e5, just saying, okay, let's fight about the center. The thing is, he played very solid openings, but he played them quite dynamically, which we will see in some of the games. He was good at sort of sensing when to attack. And this is the normal exchange variation, and this is one of the lines we have not looked at yet. This move, h3 and knight f8, this is all the main line, and after something like castle and g6 or knight h5, we have a totally normal position. Bishop f4, and this is an interesting line, and this was, I think, also the line Van Wely used to beat short in an earlier game in our series on the Carlsbad structure. So it's not a bad move. White keeps the option of putting the king to either side. So if you want to attack on the king side with g4, he can do that. Or if you want to do the, you see, like, there's one plan here and there's another plan here, depending on where the king goes. And so what to do? Black started by attacking the bishop. White do not want to part with the black squared bishop for a knight, so he has to go. And the natural move would be to go here, but of course that leaves this square a little bit weak. So white went here, which well, it's odd. It looks wrong. I don't like this move. Bishop h2 must be much better. castle, especially since okay, wait a minute, I forgot about a6. That's a multi-purpose waiting move. First of all, it's taking this square under control. So if white castle queenside, black will play c5 without something coming here at this square. We'll make a red because it's very annoying. But also, if white goes b4, then a6 might be useful against the minority attack. We often see that black can go. So a6 is kind of smart. He says, okay, I'm waiting. Where your king going? And white decided, okay, to hell with it, let's go. But then he should definitely have put his bishop on h2 so he could play g4. And black's plan is simply he will bolster this pawn. He will play rook here, then he'll play c5, and there will be funny stuff going on the c file. Usually, when white castle queenside in the queen's gambit declined exchange variation, he has to go king b1 very fast because something will always open on the c file. Rook c8, and this is planned, and white start to panic here. This move is positionally wrong. You don't want to exchange that bishop, and it's a sign that white was not very confident that his attack would lead to anything, so he's just exchanging pieces. And well, in general, white, sometimes we see that black uses a lot of move to get this exchange. The problem for white is that all his pawns are on black squares, so the white squares will be weak when the white square bishop disappears, but all black's pawns are on white squares, so the white square bishop is not missed that much because it's well, it's a big strong pawn, but not more than that at the moment. So black is happy to exchange here. And another thing, when white goes well, in all positions this square is important, but when white castle queenside, its importance becomes even bigger. So this move is good, taking control over e4, and of course with the king here you want to do this and make white's kingside position very weak. You don't really want that pawn structure when your king is on the queen side. That would have been okay if you were on the king side, but with the king here, it's not that much fun. So he moves, and knight comes in, and notice that this poor queen might run out of squares, and you would have loved to play this move, but then this move one is maybe hanging. So not so easy. So white is starting to look very clumsy. Hitting the knight. Also, the knight didn't do much on g6, so, and g6 also maybe a good move, maybe not. One of the ideas, of course, to be able to go knight f5, and also bishop e5 doesn't threaten mate. That's also can also be important. Knight d3, and here black played h5. I'm not sure that's a good move. There are other moves. You might play c5 actually, or something like that, but. And I'm just trying to start an attack. He played h5, queen, and queen b6 is probably not correct either. And here white made a huge blunder. He took the bishop. He should just play bishop e5, and I think he's probably okay in this position. I would prefer to be black, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's not a total disaster. He took, and that's kind of not so good because we see that this knight is now extremely strong. This queen is out of the game. This king can get into trouble because the attack is coming and white's counterplay is nowhere to be seen. Also, this maneuver can be interesting for black, hitting this square. But white played knight and knight f5, attacking the queen, and we see that this was not the point of white's play. His kingside attack never got going. c5. Here comes the attack, and back white is busted. And here white made a blunder. He played knight here, expecting this move, but instead black just reversed the moves and won a piece. And white resigned after this move and check. He cannot take back due to the pin, so white ends up with a piece less. So white resigned, and a nice little game, showing a little bit about how to play with black against this system. Okay, next game. And this is in 2011, and he's black against the usually very solid Alexander Lenderman, the American Grandmaster. It's from Dieren Open, and let's just get going. And this is a move order. If you're not really into playing the pure Carlsbad structure, you can do this and make white put his bishop on f4 instead. And okay, and these kind of positions, a normal move is something like this, which is okay, but you can also play differently. And when you're a guy like Radulski, who has a lot of experience in these positions, he played maybe 100 games with black in the Queen's Gambit, declined. You can sort of vary within this framework. You have different options trying to confuse white, and here black chooses a different option. Of course, the rook here is usually quite good. This is also normal, just making sure you have this structure, and we have the Carlsbad pawn structure right now. Queen c2. We have seen this in a lot of games. White made this battery. Also, this square is always important in these positions. a5, and that's a little bit weird, but Radulski probably thought it was kind of nice. He thought that white would not castle. He might castle queenside, and then it's nice to have the pawns going immediately. I think he would probably sacrifice a pawn or something with a4 if he were to castle queenside. But the problem with a5, which we have mentioned before, is if white chooses a plan with f3, then black usually want to counter with c5, but here this would make this square very weak, and that would be a problem for black. So a5 has its downsides too. It makes black's structure a little bit less flexible, because if you want to play c5, you would like to have your pawn on a6. White sends that and castle kingside, knight a6, and this is a common maneuver, threatening to take away the white squared bishop, and white definitely don't want to miss his white squared bishop. So a3 is more or less necessary. g6, just stopping any kind of nonsense on this diagonal. And of course, black is hoping one day to exchange the bishop on f5, not without ruining his pawn structure. a3, giving heir to this bishop. Knight c7, and this is a common maneuver. We'll just go through. And here, I think white should start preparing f3 and e4. So something like f3 would be the probably the best move here. Just or rook e1, and saying, okay, I'm not going for the minority attack, because my position is first black has played a5, and my knight is on e2, so it cannot go to e5 and so on. So it's maybe not that great to go for the minority attack. So we went this anyway, and I think there's a slight inaccuracy. Knight here, bishop here, and if you've never seen it before, a very weird move, but if you've been following this course, it's quite natural. Knight d7, fianchetto the knight, but the idea is, of course, to play bishop f5, and that has sort of a trickle down effect on the position, that after these two bishops disappear and white goes b4, then this square becomes weak, and knight might settle there. So it's sort of stifling white's minority attack that he's planning. So white decided, he's come with bishop f5, but what if I meet bishop f5 with e4? So this looks good, but instead black chooses to say, okay, you played f3 here, now I'm going to attack you instead. So here comes a knight attacking here. black square's weakness, queen here, and knight here. So black is sort of clearing to attack down here, and at the moment white has temporary black squared weaknesses. I think the best move here would be bishop f4, and I think it's all good. I think this is more or less an equal position. Instead, white miscalculated. He took here thinking that black had to take back with the pawn, but he does not. And by the way, Radulski was very good at these kind of calculations. He just bashed out this move. You don't want to take, then he takes with the bishop on f5, something like here and here, and this pawn would be weak, and the black square would be weak, and black will have the bishop pair and no weaknesses and a clear advantage. So this was a, but then Zwischenzug, the German words, is pretty good, attacking the queen, and so black gets time to take back the bishop. And say, okay, and white has probably thought, e4, and I get in e4, and I will have some attacking chances. The problem is the two knights are not really dangerous. They have to get much closer to the king to pose a threat. So white is not really attacking. He's just standing there, and black has a lot of dynamic potentials on the black squares, which we will see. Here, Radulski comes, of course, he had a good sense for this, so b5, a strong move, bolstering this knight on b5. Okay, and it's a pawn sacrifice, and white thought, okay, black will get some compensation, but I'm probably I'm a pawn up. It's probably a little better for me or something, but it's not. Here, I think actually already something like this is really strong, threatening rook here, and queen is coming, and white is totally uncoordinated, and the position is really unpleasant. Rook b8 is not bad, but it was maybe not the most precise move. And here bishop h4 again would have been good, just taking all the black squares. The missing pawn is not important. White's pieces are not coordinated. There's a huge hole here that you can't fix. But okay, bishop d5 is probably threatening this move. So f4, and here comes the rook into the position. Queen goes, bishop here into the black squares, and notice it's taking away this square, which is the open file that really matters. So, and the knight are again covering each other, making them very ineffective and sort of tactically weak, which is a common theme, which was also the problem when the knight was on e2 and c3. And Radulski sense, okay, I actually have a very good chance of going for direct attack. Idea is of course to come here, and after this move, which makes sort of sense to just be able to play rook e2, are also covering this. Black has a great double attack, queen d7, hitting the knight and hitting the pawn. He can't cover both, so he attacks the knight, thinking, okay, it will have to go, and it's not going here, or you can take something, but it doesn't matter. But this, of course, was a miscalculating, because black is threatening mate, getting all these pieces into the game, and boom, here comes the other one. And white has probably counted on this move to save him, but unfortunately, and this is a very typical Radulski combination, this move destroys all the fun. The king can't run because of queen h1 and it's mate, so have to take, and losing the queen, and the rest is pretty simple here. And another small combination, forking the rook, double attacking the rook and the knight, and white resigns this ruin of a position. A great game by Radulski, a typical counterattack, and showing that white cannot just sit and think that, okay, I'm gonna be playing all over the board, because then you might get smashed out of the court. Okay, last game. And he is black against Ivailo Enshev. It's the Bulgarian Championship in 2011. We have a standard. is all the main line. And we have seen this many times before. Here white chose to take, which is a line that Karpov has also used, so we should not condemn it in any way. And b4, and black chooses a6, and I've slowly come to the conclusion that a6 is in general a good move to play, even though it weakens these squares. And sometime, of course, a knight will do this and this, and you will be forced to a long defense of this pawn, but this is what happens. a4, but black had an idea. He wanted to go to play this idea, which was one of the plans we looked through, and just saying, okay, I have this square, and I'm probably fine here. And it's interesting. The big question is if after this, if this pawn will be weak or it will be strong. As it comes in the game, it turns out okay, and this black's control over this square turns out to be much more important, and so this is an interesting concept. And rook b8, and I think black is already fine here, and maybe he's even better. I think something like this move here looks pretty good for black. I don't see any kind of trouble. Black will get a lot of counterplay in all the cases on the b file, and at the moment white cannot attack the weak pawns on the queen side, and this pawn could also be weak. So, and black does have the bishop here. He still played this, and well, that was maybe psychologically smart because it triggered this move, which is a clear mistake. You should not play this move unless you can attack on the king side after this move, because at this point white actually have a clear majority on the king side, but he needs pieces to attack, and also if he can't attack, then black has a clear majority in the center, which is of course a more important strategic feature. Rook b4, very nice move, starting to the activity of the pieces. Queen b6, hitting here, and actually also hitting here. So the next move is forced, covering both. Knight comes in, and this was actually a mistake because I think white has this blow in this position, and he's okay. He will take and play e4, and there will be a lot of different pins, and white is at least okay. He didn't see this, so knight c5 was not correct, but it looks good, and as it comes, it works out wonderful for black. And that was a problem. That I'm sure he didn't see that. Rook takes, knight takes, or yeah, or something, or rook b3 is probably very good. Okay, and this turns out really bad for white because black just gets a lot of activity. Just move up the board. Something like this is met with this move, which is very annoying, and pretty good calculation by the black player, Radulski. Bishop c4, and black is totally in control here, threatening all kinds of stuff, and just push this pawn is just going to decide the game, and black is even material up here, and yeah, it doesn't help anything. And this was the end of the game. A great game by Julian Radulski, and it's sad he's not with us anymore, but we can still enjoy his games and learn from him. It's a good method for studying openings and studying a specific kind of position to look at what the expert does and then just copy it. It's really a smart way to go, and I can recommend it for a lot of players. If you want to learn the night of, even though it's of the games of course dated, then it's probably a good idea to see how Kasparov played with black, or these days how Graf plays with black. And this is a very good, simple approach that works a lot, because the experts, they usually have a lot of ideas, and when you sort of dive into it, you will learn a lot. This has been GM Talks with another video on the Carlsbad Pawn Structure. We are starting to become real experts on this channel. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you soon.